Hello, welcome to Holistically Speaking. I am Angelique Devost, your host. Our mission with Holistically Speaking is to be the avenue through which the voices of holistic health reach you at the time you need it most. That voice today is my sister, Angelique Devost. I've invited Angelique, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I've invited Angelique because I have always admired how much she does towards living sustainably. She's kind of a role model for me, and I aspire to be as good as she is. So the other day we were having a conversation about this, and I thought, why not have the conversation on the show? And thank you for saying, oh yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah, it is fun.
So you've been doing this for many years. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if there was a moment in your life that maybe you had an epiphany or that something all of a sudden clicked, and what that might have been.
I would say it started more than 20 years ago, and I started becoming aware of the food I was eating. So it started as a health concern, and I remember reading, I think it was one of the Robbins, Diet for a New America, Fit for Life, those types of books, and starting to get a lot of information about the sources of my food and how animals were treated, and of course, it's a very short step from there to the environment, and somehow I started getting seventh generation catalogs, and so I bought canvas bags like in the early 90s, and I started using them for my food shopping. And it wasn't until after I moved to Vermont that I really started getting into reusing containers, and I like to play the game of seeing how little packaging I can bring home that's disposable, whether it's garbage or recycling, and so I've made a lot of progress.
And so I love that you mention seventh generation as part of the inspiration that helped you get started. And we actually have a quote for our viewers of the principle on which seventh generation, the company, was started. And the quote is from the great binding law of the Iroquois nations, and it reads, "In every deliberation, we must consider the impact on the seventh generation." And that's a really powerful statement. And what you're saying is that from that moment, you started to have an awareness of wanting to make choices in a way where you're considering what's the impact that you're having. Right? So then you say that once you moved to Vermont, you started playing this game of how little packaging. So was there a catalyst about being in Vermont that got you thinking that way?
Well, it's Vermont. Right. That's what we do here. But it's also so easy. For example, there are so many items at the co-op that are sold in bulk. There's the farmer's market during the warmer months that I go to all the time, and these, the co-op especially supports you bringing in your own containers, and they'll weigh them for you, and then you're just filling those each time you go, and so you're not ever throwing anything away. You're using the contents, you're washing them, and you're reusing them. And so it's really been easy. The tricky part is just remembering to do it. Right.
So you have a plethora of little containers. So I would love for you to show us some of the little things that you've done with these containers. Because I think that the great thing about having you on the show talking about this is that you're essentially showing us that it can be really easy and that anybody can do it. You don't have to be an expert. You just have to have the will and the desire to do this. So can you show us some of the things that you've done?
So in terms of reusable containers, this is an organic garlic powder jar that I bought when I first moved here, and then when I ran out I decided, well, I don't use that much of it. It's better to buy less and have it be fresher. So I brought this jar, emptied out and cleaned, to the co-op, and they weighed it. It weighs 0.35. They call that the tear. And the number for powdered garlic is 2352, so I use my P-Touch and I put that on because I like things to be tidy. You know how anal I am. But I'm reusing something that I bought. Same thing with these guys. These were honey jars, 1 pound and 2 pound jars, and so I like to buy my bulk teas in them, and again, I put the tear on there and the number of the product, and I just reuse them over and over again. And for larger things, like I like to take sea salt baths with baking soda, so I have large containers like this.
Right.
And I do the same thing. And so when I empty them out, I toss them in my shopping bag. I keep this big market bag by the door, and so it's really easy to remember that way.
Right. And the thing that, obviously, you are very organized and tidy in terms of having your own little label maker and putting, it's just, of course, I love it. I don't have that level of creating labels, but it can be as simple as a piece of masking tape, and just writing on it what's the weight of the empty container.
Yeah, and you know, when I'm buying something for the first time, they always have masking tape there by the bulk items, and you put a piece of masking tape on it, and they have markers, and you write the number, and then they know, you know, what they're charging you for at the register. And then, you know, if it's something that I'm only going to buy once, then I don't bother with the label maker. Those are just my repeat items.
Right, the ones you really like.
The ones I really like a lot.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that so many things are available in bulk. You know, there's everything from gluten-free products for those who are looking for gluten. You know, there's quinoa pasta, and then of course all of the cereal products, all the grains, all the beans, flours, etc., and then all the spices. So,
and nuts, all kinds of nuts, and yeah.
And it's I remember hearing Nina Lesser-Goldsmith from Healthy Living. She said that the items in the bulk section are the freshest because people buy them and use them so much that they rotate very quickly. So the spices in the bulk section are going to be fresher than the ones on the shelves. You know, those have probably been in containers for months and months.
Yeah, and teas, you know, all different varieties of teas. And the other thing too is you have greater control of the volume in which you're buying. Like, you don't have to buy a big bag of flour if you only need 2 cups and you know you're not going to use it again, and then it doesn't get stale in your cupboard. And bulk items, of course, tend to be less expensive because you're not paying for the packaging. You know, they're delivered in bulk and they're put in these bins for you to you know, purchase from. So I think it's really optimal. It's cost saving. You know, it's great for the planet. And
yeah, because obviously we're paying for the container.
Right.
We're paying for that glass container. If we buy garlic in a glass container every time, we're paying for the new container. So it's going to be cheaper in bulk.
Right. And then, you know, there's also the cost of recycling it, if that's what
That's a really interesting point that you brought up when we were talking about this the other day, that you said even recycling has an energy cost. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So, you know, take this jar, for example. You know, let's kind of quickly follow the chain of manufacture. So they made the jar, and then it was bought by the company that makes the garlic powder, and then they fill it, and then it's shipped to the store, and then I bought it, and then I brought it home. If I didn't reuse it, basically I would have just rinsed it out and thrown it in the recycling, and then it would have gone to wherever the recycling gets to be sorted, and eventually it gets ground up and remade into something else, which is great, but that still requires energy to transport it, and you know, I'm sure there's some washing involved in it, and whatever the process is that they have to put this through to make it into something else, all of that takes energy.
Of course.
And it's great that we do that as opposed to throwing this in the landfill, which would have happened, you know, 20, 30, 40 years ago and before, but this is still a better way, you know, keep it in circulation.
Right. So this, you know, obviously the container element is something directly related to kind of the reducing the earth pollution, if you will, you know, reducing how much stuff we send into a landfill, and even you know, setting aside the things that are recyclable. The things that are not recyclable are obviously a lot more concerning. So, you know, this just popped to mind for me as we were kind of prepping for this show today. Just very recently, there was an interview with the the man who created the K-Cups.
Oh, right.
And you know, he sold his stake back in '98 or whatever, where they were selling like 3 million K-Cups, and he sold it, and now it's billions of K-Cups that are, you know, flooding the planet, and they're not recyclable. So that's the sort of thing that when we start to take awareness of that, we can maybe start to move towards a different choice.
Right.
And I know you don't have a K-Cup machine.
I know, they drive me crazy. Although my son and daughter-in-law do, and there is a reusable cup, and there are, I don't know if they're biodegradable or if they're recyclable little things that you can get instead of the K-cup that are definitely more environmentally friendly.
Yeah, there's like a little basket or a little filter that you can put
something
in
like,
and put
something
your own
like
coffee.
That. Right, right. You know, I'm a big fan of the French press. You know, there's not even a filter with that. So,
right.
You know, but yeah, they're really wasteful.
They are. So tell me what else, like what's the next step once you've taken the step of reducing your consumption of things that are going to end up in the landfill and potentially even recycling. What's the next step?
The next step, well, I'm a big fan of growing my own food and composting.
Right.
And I do have a composter in my yard, which I love. It's frozen now. So I've been putting my food scraps in those biodegradable bags and taking them to the transfer station because you can drop off food scraps there until my composter is warm enough to cook it down again.
Right.
But you know, it's really great. Historically, I've put it on my soil every year, and then I have it rototilled in. And you know, it's great to not only grow your own food if you can, and you can do it in pots on your patio. You don't have to have a yard with a garden. You know, in cities they do it on rooftops now. It's just really, really great how creative people are getting. And I also love to support local farmers, and I love the farmers market.
Yeah.
And you know, again, that's a place where I go with my own bags. I use these too at the co-op or the supermarket. They're bags that you can buy that actually help prolong the life of produce. I believe this is coated with a mineral coating. They really do work really well, and you can rinse them out and reuse them. And I just keep washing them until they spring a leak, and then I throw them out.
I think one of the things they do is that they contain the gases that food ripening emit, and so they don't ripen each other more quickly. They kind of stay more stable.
So I use these, I bring them to the farmer's market, I bring them to the co-op and so on. And then of course, you know, there are the shopping bags. Yeah. These are great because you can toss them in your purse. And I have...
And you have your original.
My original. I bought a bunch of these. These are 7th generation canvas shopping bags. I've had these since the early 90s.
Yeah.
This is why my kids call me a hippie. But, you know, it just leave them in the car, leave them by the door, and it's not hard to... You just have to get in the groove, get in the habit.
And in some places, it's becoming mandatory to bring your own bags to the grocery store. I believe most places will give you a discount for not using plastic or paper bags. If you bring your own bag, that you'll get a discount. A funny story is that I don't have the long-lasting produce bags. I think I have like 2. Maybe one is yours.
Probably.
That I just grab produce and I put it in my cart without any bag because I don't want the bag. And it drives my mother nuts. When she's like, why don't you grab a bag? And I say, I don't want the bag. I don't want to use the plastic. Yeah. I don't want to increase the consumption. So I just need to get myself some reusable bags.
Well, and there are a lot of things like, you know, if I'm only going to buy 3 apples, I don't bother with the bag, or sweet potatoes, onions, those types of things. You know, just throw them in your cart and buy them that way.
Yeah, it helps with things that are maybe a little bit, have some moisture in them, like kale or lettuce or whatever.
Yeah.
So what about composting? So for those of us who hadn't done it, and I just barely started composting recently, so now I feel like I'm in the know, but when you're not composting, it feels like a big chore. So tell us a little bit about how that can become doable.
You know, I just, I got it at the transfer station, but they also sell them at Agway, the green bins that you can put on the countertop, and they have a carbon filter in the top to keep the smell down. And I've more recently started lining them with the compostable bags, just because it makes cleanup a little easier, a lot easier actually, and they also control the smell. And the things that go in there, you know, coffee grounds go in there, tea, any kind of produce that you've cut up and used, apple cores, all of that good stuff. Eggshells are a good thing to go in. Eggshells add calcium to the soil. And so you know, again, it's a habit thing. And once you start doing it, you don't want to put them in the garbage anymore, you know?
Yeah.
It's part of the game.
Well, one thing that was a major turning point for me was that I had someone from Green Mountain Composting here as a guest a few months ago. And when she said, you can just compost and bring it to the transfer station, or there's even delivery, pickup service. So I just felt compelled to do it because she shared with us how composting helps to rebuild the soils. A lot of the issues that we're having with, landslides is that we're losing that topsoil, and without that topsoil, without that rich kind of compost-rich topsoil, the earth can't retain water, and then it just washes away, and we can't grow food. So instead of sending it to the landfill, I just all of a sudden felt compelled to do it, and I got a little bin, and I first started a pickup service, but they decided to stop. So now I accumulate, of course it helps that it's the winter, but I accumulate a couple buckets full, and then I drop it off, and it feels so good.
Yeah.
And my garbage never smells. I can have weeks and weeks of garbage, and I'm kind of playing your game. It's like, how little garbage can I generate?
Yeah, exactly.
Because if it's not recyclable or compostable, I really want the least amount of content to go into that trash can.
Yeah, and there is a growing awareness of the need to dispose of things and recycle things responsibly, even electronics. So I made a recent trip to my local transfer station, and I dropped off food scraps. I dropped off CFL light bulbs that had expired, batteries, used batteries. I had an old scanner, electronics. I dropped that off there, and it was just great. One stop, and they were different little buildings, and I got rid of it all, and it wasn't going into the trash, and it was being taken care of responsibly, and it felt easy.
Right. And it's easy enough to find where that is, if someone has never, like I hadn't ever been to the transfer station until maybe a couple months ago when I realized, oh my God, my compost isn't going to get picked up. I need to bring it somewhere. So I found out all of the different transfer stations and when they're open around Burlington, and it's really easy to go and just drop it off, and it feels really good. And
it does feel good, yeah.
So are there other things that you are either doing or thinking of doing more consistently in order to lighten your footprint?
Well, from an energy perspective, I've been changing out all of the bulbs with LEDs.
Yeah.
The CFLs are great. They're just, the light is kind of, and they take a while to warm up. And so as I replace them, I love the LEDs. It's a much better light. All of my exterior lights on my house are LED, and I am really surprised at how much my energy or my electric bill has dropped.
Oh, wow.
And, I'm not all on LED, but all the exterior lights, and probably about half of my interior lights are LED now. And, I'm talking like maybe $20 to $30 a month.
That you're saving?
Oh, yes.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is a lot. I was surprised.
And so, can you share a little bit more about the benefit of these light bulbs versus conventional?
Well, the
incandescent bulbs.
The incandescent bulb, of course, they use a lot of energy. They don't last that long, so you're going to go through more of them. And LEDs are expensive, but you can get them on sale. Home Depot will have specials, or True Value Hardware, and they last forever.
Right.
Comparatively speaking.
Right.
And so they are more expensive, but once you put it in your lamp, you're not going to be, you don't have to have tons of them around to replace the bulbs. And the light fixtures that I bought for the outside of my house don't even have bulbs in them. They've got LED, I'm not even sure what you would call it, but it's not a bulb. It won't ever burn out.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and when the electrician installed them, he said, these are really great lights and they'll last forever.
Oh, wow.
Like, yay.
So are they somehow like solar powered, or?
They're not solar powered, they're electric. And when you look up, so there's a glass shade, and when you look up inside, you see when it's on these really bright, like little light filaments. So it must be what's on the inside of an LED bulb, but it's actually on a metal plate. And so it glows outward and it looks like a regular light, but it doesn't have a bulb in it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. I had no idea.
I know. I didn't either.
So a lot of the things that as we're talking about, we're looking at reducing the contamination of the earth, reducing the impact of the things that we just throw out and affect our soils, et cetera, and landfills. What about water preservation? Are you aware of any particular? Are you taking any steps that you're conscious of, or? Some of the things that I think are affecting our waters, obviously, the plastic. It frightens me to think of the plastic islands that are floating in the Pacific and the Atlantic of just millions of plastic bottles that are being discarded. That's one example. Or, the runoff of chemicals in our sewer systems that never really get fully cleared out. So what are some steps that people might take around that?
Well, I don't generally buy bottled water. I mean, unless I'm away from home and I don't have my bottle with me, which is pretty rare. But it's always good to have, bottles.
Cheers.
I love these. Cheers. But yeah, in terms of water, just not being conscious of how much it's running. Of course, when you're a family and you've got kids to bathe and maybe a dog to bathe and all of that, right. It can be challenging, but you can just be mindful. What I would love to do, and I don't have, you mentioned things that I would love to do that I haven't done yet. I would love to get a rain barrel. And, there are those times, late July, early August when it's dry and you need to water the garden. I would like to, and the flower beds, et cetera, I would really like to have a rain barrel. And that would be a really good water saving measure, because otherwise it just runs off, and ends up.
One of the things that I think about in terms of helping to preserve water quality is the products that I use inside my house. The cleaners, the toilet bowl cleaner, the dish detergent, the shampoo, everything that goes down the drain. I'm just so hyper aware. And funny enough that it was also seventh generation when I first, I was living in New York City when I first discovered the seventh generation brand, and I realized what they stood for and what they were doing, and that's when I started shifting and saying I need to buy things that are not going to have a negative impact. So I'll buy biodegradable soaps and laundry detergent and non-petrochemical types of cleaners. Any tips or ideas that you have on that?
I make my own window cleaner with water and white vinegar and just like a drop of dish detergent, and vinegar and water will clean just about anything. It doesn't smell great, granted, but the smell dissipates pretty quickly. But you can find online all kinds of like homemade cleaners that are really easy to make, super cheap. And, so I have a Windex bottle from the last time I bought Windex, which was probably about 7 years ago. And water and vinegar and a little bit of dish soap goes in it, and it's so easy to refill, and I just refill it as I need it. And the other thing that I do is I try to use rags instead of paper towels. Because over time, you accumulate old towels anyway. It's really easy to tear them into pieces and use those, and they work really well.
Yeah, using paper towels and paper napkins is something that I really seek to avoid. So I love having cloth napkins, and then if somebody's visiting, they get their own napkin ring, and each one is different, so that I have my napkin with my napkin ring, and I just use it until it's clearly dirty and it needs to be washed. But that's one thing that makes me feel good.
You know what? I like to buy pretty napkins. Like, you're going to use things that make you happy. So, buy pretty napkins and you'll use them. But I have been using cloth napkins for a long time now.
What do you think might be the first step that someone can take? We've talked about a bunch of things, and so what would be a place to start for people?
I would say the first step would be getting in the habit of bringing your own bags. This is where I started. There's a lot of talk and support for this. I know even the supermarket in Middlebury, you walk up and it says, "Did you remember your own bags?" You know, so they're even putting up notices to remind people, and they sell them inside. So even if you haven't forgotten, or if you don't have any, you know, for a couple of bucks, you can get some bags and reuse them. And you know, just look at what you buy. And actually, the supermarket has a lot of bulk bins too, especially for nuts. You know, not nearly as many as the co-op, but there are things that you could bring your own container to purchase there as well. And the idea is to just kind of keep an eye on it and keep looking, like, what else can I do? You're not going to do what I do all at once. It's taken me probably maybe 3 or 4 years to get
going,
focused on it. Yeah.
Get in a groove.
And I'm in the groove, and I will actually not buy something I want if I forgot the jar at home. That's how much it drives me crazy. Like, don't need that tea today. So, and you know, I like to make it a game. You know, I really, because it just feels good when you know you're doing a good thing, and it feels responsible. And I really believe that there's a correlation between how good of a care we take of ourselves and how good a care we take of the earth. Right. And so, you know, I look at the things that I do for myself, and I notice that I'm doing pretty much the same for the planet that sustains me, and it means a lot. Right.
Yeah, it's a powerful thought to think that caring for ourselves and the planet are one and the same. Yeah. That the actions we take to care for the planet are going to be the healthiest actions we can take. It's just really a powerful thought to have.
One thing that motivates me is everything that I throw in the garbage. I look at it and I'm like, you know, millions of people are probably throwing this in the garbage. You know, think about that. So whatever it is, and what does that look like, you know, out in a field somewhere, you know, with millions, like the K-Cups, you know, billions of people are throwing this away. What does that look like? Right. And that's a pretty strong motivator.
I actually, in this article that I read about the billions of K-Cups, just to get an image of it, is that there are enough K-Cups out there in trash to circle the earth 12 times. Ugh. So that's a lot of K-Cups. And that's just K-Cups. You know, there's the plastic bottles, and then, you know, all the plastic wrappers. And so we have a few more minutes, but I want to ask you, how do you feel this has impacted your life, taking these steps? Difficult question.
Well, no. I would say it's been a good self-esteem builder, you know? Well, because sometimes there are lots of things going on in the world that make you feel powerless, and here's a small thing that you can do, and it makes a really big difference, I believe.
Right. Yeah. So I want to show our viewers how to look up where their transfer stations are and where to get inspiration for taking all these little steps. So you can look up your local drop-off transfer station simply by Googling something like Chittenden Solid Waste District transfer stations. I did that Google search and I got the different locations and hours for the transfer stations in Chittenden County. You can also go to www.anr.state.vt.us, and that has all of the listings of all the transfer stations in the state, right? And then you can also visit www.seventhgeneration.com. We added that just before the show because Angelique pointed out that they have so many great tips and suggestions for sustainable living. That's what they are all about. And so it's a great resource to look at. So thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome, and thank you.
I'm really excited about putting this out there, because as it has changed your life and helped you feel better about your decisions, I'm sure that everybody else will feel the same. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining. See you next time.